there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. We are continuing our examination of Book 7 of the Ethics and looking at today chapter 12, which is the third chapter to the final wrapping up of chapter book 8, book 7, book 7, which has the 14 chapters in that sense, which is interesting because now next after book 7 finishes, in many ways these are kind of wrapping themes up, problems of pleasures and pains. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at pleasure again. This is the theme, particularly the concerns of pleasures and pain of last chapter, about things that the last chapter was more why pleasure is not the good. Remember, the whole theme is the question of those who are concerned about philosophizing about the political things, about pleasures and pains. Okay, pleasures particularly. So let's start out. Right, let's go look to here. But that it does not turn out on account of these things. Pleasure is not good, or not even the best thing. It is clear from the following points. So, but that it does not turn out. But that it does not turn out. That on account of these things. In other words, it's not because of the previous arguments that they've done, that pleasure is not the best, is not good, or not even the best things. Now, what he says first, since the good is twofold, there is the good unqualifiedly, and the good that is for the particular person. It will follow that both natures and characteristics are good in a twofold sense. So therefore, natures and characteristics are twofold. There's the nature of a thing that's good that is uniform unqualifiedly. There's good unqualified and good for the particular person. But also follows that both natures and characteristics are good in a twofold sense. The result of this is that motion or changes and processes is that motions and processes of coming into being will be good in a twofold sense as well. So therefore, there is the question: things that come into being, that motion and processes of coming into being, is good in a twofold sense as well. Some of the base motions and processes seem to be base unqualifiedly. So therefore, there are some motions and processes that seem to be base, bad, good, unqualifiedly. Whereas for a particular person, they are not such, but are even choice-worthy for them. While some are not choice-worthy for him, but are such only on a given occasion and for a short time, though not unqualifiedly. So therefore, there's some things that are unqualifiedly bad, but for this person, they're not. But for that particular person, they're not. They are not such, but are even choice worthy for them. So something that is this motion or this thing is particularly bad, generally perceived to be bad in general, but for some people, it's not bad. It's choice worthy. While some are not choice worthy for him, but are only on a given occasion and for a short time. So that's generally good for them, but not generally good for them, but on a specific occasion for a specific time, it's good for them. But not unqualifiedly, although not unqualified. In other words, it's not simply good for them. So some of these are not even pleasures, but merely appear to be. So some of these things, these motions, are not even pleasures, but appear to be. They merely appear to be. For all those that are accompanied by pain and are for the sake of medical treatment, like those that like those the sickly undergo, for example. In other words, that there's some things that are not pleasures. They're, in other words, they appear to be so. They get better. They get better. The company for all those that are accompanied by pain and for the sake of medical treatment, and like those sickly go through, for example, right? Further, since one part of the good is an activity, another a characteristic. So one is an activity, one's an action, right? Activity doing, and the other one is a condition, right? A characteristic. Whatever restores us to our natural characteristic is pleasant only incidentally. So in other words, that we have an activity and then therefore that we restore to our natural characteristic is pleasant in its accidentally sense. But there is an activity involving the desires of our characteristic and our nature when these remain unimpaired, since there are also pleasures unaccompanied by pain and desire. For example, the activity bound up with contemplation when one's nature is not deficient. So this is 51. The manuscript here is somewhat different. The other readings are possible, for example, the pleasures of contemplation, or, for example, the activities bound up with contemplation. Right. So therefore, there's different translations here. Uh, uh, so, for example, there is activity that is not dealing with pleasure and pain, unaccompanied by pain and desire. This is the pleasure that you get when you contemplate, when bound up in contemplation, when one nature is not deficient. A sign of this is that people do not enjoy, in other words, a sign of this is that people do not enjoy the same pleasure when their nature is undergoing restoration or replenishment, and when it has been restored. Rather, the restored nature enjoys the unqualified pleasures, but the nature that is undergoing restoration enjoys even the contrary pleasures. For people often enjoy both sharp and bitter things. None of these are pleasant by nature or pleasant unqualifiedly. So, sharp and bitter things are not necessarily things that are pleasant by nature or pleasant unqualified. But some people, these sharp and unpleasant things, in other words, these uh, sharp and bitter things may be what? Um, Enjoying, well, because they restore something, they restore. So therefore, in other words, that in the complete sense, when they're healthy and they're in their restored condition, rather the restored nature enjoys unqualified pleasures. The one who's undergoing restorations, they do not. That these people do not enjoy the same pleasures when their nature is being undergoing restoration or replenishment. So therefore, there is a difference. That when you're being restored, you might enjoy, in other words, some kind of something sharp or something that's normally better, that are not unqualified. The pleasant are pleasant in that sense. But when you're healthy and you're restored, that isn't going to be pleasant in that sense. Things that were, and there you enjoy the unqualifiedly pleasant. Neither, as a result, are the pleasures involved. For the various pleasant things stated in relation to one another, so do the pleasures arising from them. So therefore, in other words, there are pleasures that are dealing. There's certain things that occur during restoration that gives you pleasure, but that you wouldn't feel when you're in normal state. Okay. So therefore, what you get pleasure from condition, what is pleasant and not or is different in an unqualified sense, is what only can be enjoyed by the condition that you're in, the general, the restored state, the state that you're in unimpaired. Okay, and therefore this is that an understanding here in that sense. So let's look at this. That one says one part of the activity is a characteristic that restores us, right? Therefore, another involving desires of our characteristics and our natures, even these remain unimpaired, right? Um, so the example of this is the person who gets benefit, who gets pleasure from contemplating, philosophizing. When their nature is not deficient in that sense, their nature is not having a deficiency. They enjoy the pleasure. There is a pleasure in this, and that's not it's tied to not is not tied to a bodily pleasure in that sense, but you feel something in that sense, right? And then the question of there's a difference between the restorative pleasure and the condition of that when you are restored and you are in the full health and full capacity. Okay. Further, it is not necessary for there to be something else that is better than pleasure. So there's not something else that there is something better than pleasure, in the way that some assert that the end is better than the process of coming into being. So, in other words, it is not necessary for there to be something better than pleasure, in a way that some assert that the end is better than the process of coming to being. For pleasures are not processes of coming to being. So wait a minute, they're not. For nor are all pleasures even accompanied by a company of being. So he's rejecting it here. He's rejecting the claim that pleasures are a form of process of coming to being. And nor are all pleasures even accompanied by a coming into being. Rather, they are activities and an end. So pleasures are both an activity and an end. And they do not occur when there is a coming into being, but when our capacities are put to use. So it's not because of a coming into being, but when our capacities are put to use. Not all pleasures have something else as an end, but only the pleasure belonging to those that are being led towards the completion of their nature. So not all pleasures have something else as an end, but only the pleasures belonging to those whom are being led towards the completion of their nature. So they have a nature. They have a nature. This pleasure. They have a nature. They have a thing that they're completing their nature. They're doing something that nature requires them to do. These are the what? These are the pleasures that are what? These are the pleasures that have. Not all pleasures have an end. So they're fulfilling their nature. That is the one that doesn't have an end. Other pleasures may have an end. You cheat this and you get some pleasure from doing that, right? You want to do this and you get the pleasure from doing that end, right? So there are some that are not driven by an end, but then there's others that are driven by the end, right? Hence, also, it is not a noble thing to assert that pleasure. It is not a beautiful or noble thing to assert that pleasure is a perceptible process of coming into being. So it's not noble, it's not beautiful to say this. One ought rather to say that it is an activity of the characteristic that accords with nature. So it is one ought rather to say that is an activity of the characteristic that accords with nature. And instead of perceptible, one ought to say unimpeded. So it's not the question of the perceptible or unimpeded coming into being. Not a perceptual process, but unimpeded. But pleasure is held by some to be a process of coming to being, because it is good, because it is good in an authoritative, a ruling sense. So therefore there is some, but pleasures is held by some to be a process of coming into being, because this it is a good and authoritative. They suppose that the activity is a process of coming being, but in fact it is something else. So it's not. This is an incorrect opinion. It's not a. It is not a process of coming being. It is rather coming towards. It is fulfilling its end. It's fulfilling its nature. It's either fulfilling what its nature, or it is a byproduct, a characteristic of doing something and going towards something, right? But saying that pleasures are bad, base, phelos, rather than kakos. So this is not, this is bad. Here is, it's not saying kakos, but rather phalos, phalolos. So, but saying that pleasures are bad because some pleasant things cause disease is the same thing as saying some helpful things are bad because they're bad when it comes to money making. Okay, in other words, helpful, healthful things are bad because they're bad. In other words, he's saying that just because some pleasures pleasant, because some pleasures are bad because the pleasant things cause disease, is saying, well, okay, yeah, that's not because they're all bad. They're bad in that condition. They're bad because they do that. Because yes, that some helpful things are bad because they don't they're not useful when it comes to money making, or bad because of money making. In this respect, then, both pleasant and helpful things are bad, but that at least does not make them bad in themselves. In other words, they're bad only in the sense of in trying to do this action. In other words, in order to be these pleasures are bad if you're trying to be healthy. These pleasures for this person is unwise because it leads to unhealth. Okay, that's particularistic. Whereas I'm trying to make this healthy thing, this activity may be good for being healthy, but for trying to make money, it may not be the useful thing to do, right? In this respect, then, both pleasant and helpful things are bad, but at least does not make them bad in themselves, even contemplating even contemplating may at some point harms one health. In other words, contemplating, thinking about things, contemplating can actually lead, it can even lead to harming one health. Saying the things that, in other words, they may be things, a good thing done by in the wrong way at the wrong time may be bad. So the difference between a trait may be a good or bad thing, but how it's being done may achieve good or bad results. So that twofold sense, right? And neither prudence nor any characteristic is impeded by the pleasure arising from either. So, in other words, prudence or any characteristic, any of the virtues in the states that people have while holding that virtue, are impeded by pleasure arising from either. Rather, the pleasures foreign to them are impediments. So, therefore, foreign pleasures are impediments, since those pleasures arising from contemplation and learning will only make us contemplate and learn more, right? So, therefore, the foreign things, in other words, there's certain, neither prudence or any character is impeded by pleasures arising from them, those things, the things that they're done. Example, that it's only foreign pleasures, are pleasures foreign to the action or the characteristic, are impediments. So, since he gives the example, pleasures arising from contemplation and learning only make us contemplate and learn more. But that no pleasure, but that no pleasure, but that no pleasure is the work of an art happens reasonably. So this point about no pleasure is a work of art. For there is no art of any other activity either, only of a capacity. So there is no art of any other activity either, only of a capacity. So that it's reasonable that there's no art of pleasures in that sense, because there's no other art of any other activity. Although both the art of perfume making and the art of fine cookery are held to be arts of pleasure. They produce, in other words, they're not. It's not the activity itself, pleasure. Well, but there are arts that are held to be arts of pleasure. Perfume making, it gives pleasure. The perfume making is a thing that the action, the perfumes actually give pleasure, or the food, fine cooking, gives pleasure. Okay, so it's not that it is no direct art of a activity, but you have arts that what they do things that produce the activity, right? But that the moderate person, sophosounos, avoids pleasure, that the prudent person pursues a life without pain, and that children and brute animals pursue pleasure, are all perplexity. All these perplexities are resolved by the same consideration. So these three other things, these last three concerns, are resolved by the same consideration. For since it was said, in what sense pleasure are good unqualifiedly, and in what sense not all are good, both brute animals and children pursue the sorts of pleasures that are accompanied by desire and pain. That is, the bodily pleasures. For these pleasures are such, and the excess of these pleasures. So therefore, they're not learning. In other words, the brute animals, both the brute animals and children, they pursue the pleasures desired by accompanied by desire and pain, because that is the bodily pleasures, and the excess of these, because they don't know what's better for them. They don't know. They lack knowledge. The prudent person seeks out freedom from pain associated with these same pleasures. Pleasures in reference to what is licentious. A person is licentious. So therefore, it's the right pleasures, not the wrong pleasures. In other words, hence the moderate person avoids these pleasures, the pleasures that are wrong. In other words, pleasures that produce the bad behavior, that produce. In other words, in other words, the prudent person seeks out freedom from pain associated with these same pleasures, the bodily pleasures. In that sense, why? Because pleasures in reference to these to which the licentious person is licentious, right? Hence, the moderate person avoids these pleasures, since they are pleasures belonging to the moderate. Since there are pleasures belonging to the moderate person as well. So in other words, he doesn't absolutely deny pleasure. He just doesn't. He just doesn't seek or enjoy the wrong pleasures. The prudent, he enjoys pleasure, but does not go to excess to pleasure. He doesn't have. Remember, it's about moderation. Sophosounes is about both the enjoyment, the question of pleasure, the bodily pleasures, about not not going into excess, and not going being a deficiency either. In other words, seek the pleasure that you should, and not don't avoid pleasure that you should. That okay. It's not. It is just avoid pleasures that you should not. Right. It's not to excess or defect. That's sophosounes, so moderate person in that sense. So for the prudent person knows what is the correct action. He wants freedom. He wants freedom of choice. He doesn't want his passions destroying his choice, his ability to choose correctly. So therefore, this is what that idea here. So the children is simply, again, they they do follow this but that's because they're ruled by their, they don't know, they're driven by their bodily desires. They have not have they don't know, they don't have reason yet. Their reason is not, both animals and children, their reason is not ruling yet, and doesn't teach them about what they should choose. Therefore, they only feel, and therefore they're governed by their desires. So that's true. But then the problem here for the prudent person is what? The prudent person doesn't do this because he wants to avoid pain and excessive pleasures that give pain, that prevent good judgment in that sense, because he wants to be free, to be free and able to make the correct judgments and to do the right judgments. And likewise, it's not moderation is abstaining from pleasure. It's not. It's abstaining from the wrong types of pleasures, the bad pleasures, the pleasures that are incorrect. So let's stop here. We're stopping here, and it's like da da da. Well, if you have any questions or comments, please put them below, and I'll respond to them when you see them. When I see them. I'll give you an answer or give you a comment or something. You want further information about these questions, perplexities, and how he resolves the perplexities. If you like it, hit the like button, please. Like it, hit the like button, thumbs up it. Why? Because it helps the algorithm. More likes, the better algorithms. It helps it. In other words, you can do this as you can. Share it on your social media, share it far and wide, share it with your friends, bring it to attention. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Like to grow the channel. We need to grow the channel some more. Please bring the channel to the attention of friends who are interested in these themes and other similar books that we're covering and issues we deal here. Again, all this helps grow the channel some and expand our what we can do on YouTube. In other words, if you didn't like it, you can always thumbs down it. But please say why in the comments. That way we can benefit and we can understand, and people can learn from it. That's what we're doing here. If you want to follow me on social media, the links are below. And if you want to know more about me as an academic and see my research and see my scholarship, you can look at the social media links that are linked below. Next, you can, if you want to help me to do what I do here, want to financially help me do what I do here, in that sense, you can do so through subscribe to our Patreon. The links are below. Another thing you can do is, if you want to help me, you can also buy one of my books. Right now, the list of 3 currently available books. You can buy them either through your local bookstore or through online services like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any other one, or you can buy it through the publisher directly. Okie dokie, that's it. Next time we'll look at chapter 13, the penultimate chapter of the book 7, and we'll see you later. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.